Okay, I think we're live. So I want to go ahead and welcome everyone to our second virtual town hall in Wahiawā. The topic today is homelessness and COVID-19 in our community, and we have some very important guests. I'm super grateful that we're being joined by Reverend Jessica Kawamura. So she's from the Wahiawā United Methodist Church. We're also being joined by Executive Director Nikki Winter from Alea Bridge. We're also being joined by Mr. Edward Mercero, so from the Department of Health. So how I'd like to kind of focus this conversation is I'd like, if you could, each one of you to give us a little bit of background about your organization, maybe about your work with the homelessness in the past in our community, and what that work looks like now. And Reverend Kawamura, if we could start with you, that'd be great.
Sure. So as Representative Amy mentioned, I'm the pastor of Wahiawā United Methodist Church, which is just down the hill. We're neighbors with Wahiawā High School. And we have over 100 years of history. Many of you might have not met me before, though, because Methodist pastors rotate. So I was appointed to this church July 1, 2019. But I've really been enjoying getting to learn about the local community and my congregation. So when I think about the role of the church in the community, I think about really the primary teaching of Christianity, which is loving your neighbor as yourself. And for many years, our congregation has had a heart for outreach and social justice work. Representative Amy asked to speak a little bit to some of the challenges that we face. And I think the first, especially in this context right now, is many of our church members are over 65. So that means that they are in the vulnerable population. So they can't go out and assemble PPE or hand out food for their own safety. And that's also been a challenge we faced more recently in the last few years. We have a wonderful team of volunteers that's been doing plate lunch fundraisers and raising money for local organizations like Alea Bridge and Wahiawā Health. But we've been thinking more recently too about ways that we can get more involved. The other challenge that we face, as I mentioned, is that Methodist pastors rotate maybe about every 5 years. So often the pastor's new to the area, so we don't have long-standing relationships, and we're getting to know people and we're getting to understand what's going on. So that can be a challenge. And we also have a lot of military families in our congregation who are also rotating. So I think there's a lot of folks at our church who really want to help, but we also, have a lot to learn as well. The two projects that our church has been involved in most recently were first, many of you might be aware that through Alea Bridges Connections, Family Promise is starting up a rotational family shelter in Central Oahu. And the way it works is different congregations take turns hosting families that are experiencing homelessness. And that was supposed to kick off in March. But it's been on hold because of COVID-19. So we were really looking forward, and we still are really looking forward to that work. We'll be partnering with Trinity Lutheran, but that's been on hold. The other work that we're involved in is we're part of a network called Faith Action, which is a faith-based advocacy nonprofit with churches all over the island, where we go to the state capitol and advocate around systemic issues that are causing homelessness. So we're advocating most recently for affordable housing and a living wage, and knowing that some of the people who are experiencing homelessness are working but just are not earning enough to be able to pay rent, and wanting people to be able to thrive here. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to learning. I think I have more to learn than to offer, but I'm just really looking forward to this conversation.
Sorry about that. Thank you. So, Nikki, if you could talk a little bit about Alea Rolls Bridge over the years, and then more recently, how you're handling this current context.
Absolutely. So most of you guys are probably familiar with who we are and what we do. We're founded in January of 2016 to address the growing homeless issue here in Central Oahu. We're headquartered out of Wahiawā, but we started with Region 5, which consisted of Mililani, Wahiawā, and then all up the North Shore to Turtle Bay. Currently, we also are the primary service provider for Region 3, subcontracted under US Vets as well. Region 3 consists of Aiea to Kapolei. So that's roughly about 50% of Oahu. We've been doing street outreach and providing services to the homeless community in that area since January of 2016. When COVID came around, it was a real quick and major change to the way homeless services were provided. I mean, the fact of the matter is there was really no playbook for what we were dealing with. There were no rules to follow. We were all just kind of learning as we, as it went along and trying to be as dynamic as possible and roll with the punches to serve the community. But we ran into a lot of issues with things like just being able to get running water and open bathrooms for the homeless community in the beginning when it first started. We're grateful now that the bathrooms are open. And then after getting them open, we ran into issues with being able to keep them open. So we partnered with an organization called Hui Aloha, and that program is a collaboration between volunteers, homeless service providers like Alea Bridge, and the actual homeless community to come together and keep the bathrooms clean and stocked so that they can stay open. So we launched that program, and it's been a huge success out in Haleiwa and Wailua, so that's amazing. Other things were like being able to give PPE to the homeless community because there's such a great shortage, but the Department of Health is so amazingly donated PPE to a lot of these service providers. So we were able to take some of that and actually give it to the homeless people that we were encountering, as well as giving them hygiene items, food, things that they needed out there. Even, there's a lot of hardships that came out of COVID-19, but I think the really amazing thing that did come out of COVID-19 is all these new partnerships that we're able to make and forge new, collaborations, and everybody just pulling together. And for me, that's like what it's all about, and I love that. So we actually just did a joint outreach in Wailua with Hie, Project Vision's mobile hygiene unit, and Scott Miskovich's team for COVID screening, and that was a huge success. So many people came out. We did a ton of tests. We were able to get our homeless encampment into the showers, give them food, hygiene, clothing, and we look forward to doing more things like that. So whatever we can do to partner and serve our community, that's what we're here for.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I have follow-up questions for both of you. So, but I did want to also hear from Mr. Mercero, if you could talk a little bit about your role within the Department of Health with respect to this issue. And then specifically, I know that you guys have developed a new initiative around COVID-19, and I think it's really innovative and important. And I think it's going to move us actually beyond COVID-19. It's going to be very helpful. So if you could speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Rep. Russo. I appreciate you having me on, and thanks everybody else for being on. Please call me Eddie, and for all of you guys out there, please call me Eddie as well. It's a little too for me. It's a little too formal to go Mr. Mercero, but thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I'm the Deputy Director of the Behavioral Health Administration for the Department of Health, which covers several different kind of categories. One is the alcohol and drug abuse category, the adult mental health category, the child and adolescent mental health category, and developmental disabilities. And within that is the Hawaii State Hospital as well. And so we, across the board, behavioral health has got over 600 employees and, hundreds of other programs that we work with. And some of those programs have to do with homelessness and behavioral health, group homes, that kind of thing. And as Nikki was saying, COVID hit and it was, okay, what do we do now? And how do we just jump and get ready to kind of manage this and ramp up. And so one of the things that we did early on was I partnered with, many of you may know him, Scott Morishige, who's the governor's coordinator on homelessness. And so Scott and I even pre-COVID, we're working a lot together to try to link and sync behavioral health and homelessness and make a more cohesive system. And so, I called Scott and also Harold Brackeen from Homeless Programs Office at Department of Human Services and said, we got to get together and figure out how we can just inform providers, because we have a lot of providers and organizations that we contract with and work with in common. So we decided to create what we call the Behavioral Health and Homelessness Statewide Unified Response Group. And we have a website. It's bhhsurg.hawaii.gov. And so it's kind of expanded from there to where we do a lot of things like providing PPE for folks, getting it out to people as quickly as we can, doing other things like developing guidance and algorithms and crosswalks for people so that they can deal with things like telehealth and how to use PPE and things like that. So, as Nikki was saying, the big success in all of this, the silver lining is the partnerships that have been developed, and the fact that a lot of us have been forced to, in a really good way, forced to get out of our silos and start linking and syncing and weaving our efforts together so that we have a unified response. So.
Thank you. So I have some follow-up questions, and I wanted to go back to Reverend Kawamura. You mentioned Family Promise, and I know that Alay Bridge also works in partnership with Family Promise, and I think that's been really fruitful. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about precisely how it works, because I know that it's been a challenging conversation, actually, to ask congregations to come on board. Like, what is the ask for congregations? Because part of the purpose of this conversation is to bring our faith-based community organizations back into the work. I think that there was a Wahiawā Alliance on homelessness that has maybe fallen by the wayside, but the faith-based organizations were really important in that work. So maybe if you could talk about Family Promise and what is being asked of the churches.
Yeah, so Family Promise is based on a model that's used on the mainland and also here on Oahu. So we actually have sister United Methodist churches in town and on the windward side that are actually already part of Family Promise networks. And the way it works is for the geographic region, I believe there are 13 congregations that come together. So they can be of different faith traditions. And they, each of us commit for 1 week every quarter to host up to 3 families at our church. And it involves the families stay overnight. So we're planning to use our social hall. Family Promise supplies like air mattresses. We supply some sheets and partitions. And then actually usually what happens is the host congregation also provides dinner, but since we're a smaller congregation, we don't have as many resources. What we've done, I think, is the plan is that we'll partner with Trinity Lutheran. So they have resources to prepare food. So they'll provide dinner and we'll provide the place to stay. And we'll do that just in the evenings, evening to morning for 7 nights in a row. And we'll do that 1 week every quarter. So we'll do it 1 week in March and then 1 week in July and then 1 week in September. And it's all families with kids. And I think for us, we really, my lay leadership really had a desire to do outreach in the community, and the timing was really good for us to get involved. So that's been our experience so far.
Okay, thank you. I think that that kind of specific information about what is being asked of congregations is really important so that they can have those conversations about how they can be engaged. And I know that sometimes space is an issue, like often churches don't have the space, and or they might have a congregation that's in transition a lot. So I think I love the way that you're working with Trinity to kind of overcome those obstacles, right? So just in a very complementary way. I think that's really super powerful. And you mentioned Faith Action. So I think that I'm familiar with Faith Action because they are involved in legislative issues and public policy issues.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about, the scope of their work, and maybe the duration? So how long has Faith Action been working, and is it a statewide organization, or is it just a few churches? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, so Faith Action is a network that's been around for quite a while. I want to say at least 20 years. So it's been around for quite a while. It's its own 501. I don't know if actually, it might not be a 501c3, but it's a nonprofit advocacy organization. And its members are congregations all over the state. So a number of our United Methodist churches are involved. There are also UCC, Congregationalist churches involved, Catholic churches. So Our Lady of Sorrows is also a member of Faith Action here in Wahiawā. And we're advocating around issues, again, really at the heart of our Christian teaching. It's how are we good neighbors? How are we advocating for policies that are fair and just and help make sure everyone has a roof over their head, has food to eat? I mean, that's really at the heart of the work. Every legislative session, advocating around issues.
Sorry.
Again, really at the heart.
Okay,
At the state level. So this year, we've really been, right now, we're really making a hard push on a living wage, knowing that given the cost of living here in Hawaii, like we are way behind similar metropolitan areas on the mainland. And so the legislation that, was initially proposed is just a lot lower than people actually need to survive here. So that's been the primary issue we've been working on recently.
Do you think that when if the legislature comes back to session, that you are going to continue to advocate for those kinds of issues?
Yes. Yeah, that's my assumption. And Donovan De La Cruz is really a critical person on this piece of legislation because I believe he's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And I think right when the legislature shut down was I think before the legislation was supposed to go to his committee.
Okay.
So we're really hoping to engage people by having them, call their legislators and get involved.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. So Nikki, for you, I had some questions too. If you could talk a little bit about Region 5, and it seems to me that it's somewhat congruent with Councilmember Heidi Suneyoshi's district. It sounds like her district, or does it extend beyond the borders of her district, or what does that look like?
So we've worked with Heidi Suneyoshi since almost the beginning, when we first started and was founded. We have pictures of our very first event with Heidi Suneyoshi there. So yeah, she's always been a strong proponent of helping us advocate for the homeless community in Region 5. We try to work with as many people as we can, and I've always said it since I've taken this position and long before I've had this position, that we will partner with anybody who wants to partner in service to the homeless community. So that includes other community stakeholders, the homeless themselves, legislators, organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, whomever. But yeah, we worked with Heidi from the beginning since we launched in January of 2016 here in Region 5.
Awesome. And you mentioned the major issues like they seem like very concrete, basic issues of running water and bathrooms. And I'm wondering, you know, how did the I guess the the revisiting or going back to doing enforcements affect your work? Because I know that under one of the first orders, we were following the CDC guidelines and we weren't doing enforcements. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I'm not sure exactly when that shift came about, but I know that we have gone back to sweeps and enforcement.
That's correct. I can't really speak to anything other than what everybody else knows as far as what's been on the news or what we've heard in press conferences. I can really only speak to how it affects us as the homeless services provider. And in all honesty, like the sweeps make it extremely difficult or even more difficult to do what we do simply because, for example, we went out to Haleiwa Beach Park to go and engage some of our clients and they were all gone. I mean, we couldn't find them. They had just dispersed, and any other time they would pretty much have been congregating there and sheltering in place. But it just makes it very difficult for us to keep track of our clients. And when they do disperse and we can't find them for a while and then they come back or we find them again and re-engage, then we kind of have to start all over again as far as rebuilding that relationship. Okay, what have you been doing for the last 6 months? Where have you been? You know, what have you been doing? And so it's kind of like steps back. And then, you know, we're not medical doctors or experts on COVID. So we pretty much just follow the CDC guideline, which basically is shelter in place. Right. So we believe that would be the best option. But as far as, you know, the sweeps have started again and enforcements are happening. And as far as like how that came about or why that came about, again, I know as much as everybody else does based on what was told on the news. Yeah.
So I know that also I know that Wahiawā Health had to close. Well, they didn't close, like they're still doing telework, but they did shut down their facility. And I know that they work with you a lot. So I was wondering how that affected your efforts in the community.
It didn't really affect our efforts in the community at all. We communicate a lot over Zoom conferences like we're doing now, and email and telephone calls. I don't know if they actually closed per se. My understanding was they closed simply just to clean the entire health center, but they weren't like closed for business. But I mean, I can't really speak to that as well. You'd have to talk to Wahiawā Health. But as far as our partnerships, yeah, we still communicate. We get on a call every week with the Central Oahu COVID group and health providers in the area, and just discuss what everybody's doing, what's happening, new things that are coming about, things that we're concerned about, questions that we may have, and things like that. So we definitely stay in touch. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. I think that the next question I have is actually for Eddie. So when you're talking about, you talked a lot about the positive aspect, right? The partnerships that have emerged, but I'm wondering in terms of where you sit now and looking at, I think that there are serious economic struggles facing the community. I think that tomorrow's May 1st and rent is due, and there may be an eviction moratorium, but for the time being, but I'm really concerned about housing insecurity and people who are already kind of struggling. I'm wondering what you think are the challenges for your organization, for the Department of Health, and specifically for the work in behavioral health that you're doing. Because I think that, I could be wrong, but my sense is that this has been a very stressful time for a lot of people, and people who are already struggling with mental health issues. Like, I know that I didn't sleep for a month. So I know that I feel like it's psychologically challenging. And so maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think that we are extremely concerned about on a day-to-day basis, and it's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night as well, continuously. on what's in store for our community, especially starting with vulnerable populations that we're already starting to work with, in terms of that we're already working with in terms of homeless individuals and people with behavioral health or mental health issues, substance abuse. And I think most of the folks that are involved in any way, shape, or form with working with these folks understand that the pre-COVID situation was not all that great to begin with, and that the system of care was had a lot of gaps, and it had a lot of things that we were really working hard to improve. There was a lot of great work, obviously there's a lot of great work going on all the time, but there were a lot of places that we could improve. And I feel like that we were just starting to get to a point where we were coming out of, if some of you might remember, the recession in 2008, 2009, where a lot of cuts happened in relationship to behavioral health and housing and stuff like that, that we were just starting to scrape our way out of the hole that put us into, and then COVID hits. And I think that what we're gonna see, unfortunately, are increased houselessness, increased behavioral health issues, increased individuals who are struggling with depression, anxiety, substance use disorders, domestic violence. And so, I'm looking at the kind of dual issues of, seeing that the state needs to really start to take a look at how to deal with the economic crisis that it's facing because of COVID, while at the same time struggling to figure out how we can not have the rug swept out from under us again in a situation where we're going to actually need more investment in behavioral health and social services than we ever did before because of COVID. And so we're extremely concerned about it. That's a topic of conversation with myself and Scott Morshige and Harold and a bunch of other partners, state and kind of community, pretty much on a daily basis. And I think the hope that we have and the hope that we're hanging on to actually is that through the partnerships that we're developing and through the coordination that we're developing, we're going to be able to do things in a more unified manner and address these issues in a more unified manner. But we're definitely going to need to have some hard conversations about what do we do around resources and budgets and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I have a quick follow-up question, which is, we have been talking a lot about the impact of declining tourism, and it's likely that we're not going to see tourism reach its former levels. And a lot of people will say that that this is an opportunity to move away from tourism and towards different economic drivers. And I'm wondering if you think that public health or behavioral health might be an area in which, if we invest, then that can become one of our economic engines.
I would actually say yes. I think that in every crisis there is opportunity, and I think that the trick is to number one, see the opportunity, and number two, take advantage of the opportunity. And I think investment in behavioral health systems and substance use disorder systems and housing and stuff like that, those could all kind of merge together for us to be able to really kind of, get an influx of and stimulate the economy in a way that would not necessarily depend on tourism. I think I think about what I learned in history about the Great Depression and what Franklin D. Roosevelt did to get us out of that depression, and I would offer that those are some of the approaches that I think we need to kind of think about now. Just stimulate the heck out of social services and safety net kind of programs and stuff like that, And that coupled with, what has already been talked about with construction projects and things like that, I think will go a long way in kind of helping pull us out of this in a way that is beneficial.
Thank you. I think that line of reasoning deserves more attention and more consideration, because at least the feedback that I've gotten from many community members is that this is a really challenging time, but that it affords us an opportunity to really rethink our status quo and think about how we have been doing things. And I agree. I think that, with your analysis of the situation of pre-COVID Hawaii, it was really not working for a lot of people. So I appreciate your thinking on this issue. I wanted to ask the Reverend, we talked a lot about, your congregation's work with respect to houselessness and even on the systemic issues, which I think is so powerful. But I was wondering, are you worried about, and maybe just what you've seen in the community more broadly, are you worried about people now becoming even more economically uncertain? Do you see that, or do people in your congregation talk about it? Is there a concern about that?
I'm definitely concerned about it. And there are people in my congregation, that used to work for the airlines that were doing kind of travel agency type work, who are furloughed. But I really feel that I'm only seeing a very small segment of what's going on in the larger community. And so I'm really interested in like what Nikki is seeing on the ground, what you've learned, and then what we can do kind of moving forward to help people.
Yeah. Nikki, what about you? Like beyond, you're working with a lot of different partners, and I'm sure that the nonprofits have been affected too. And even people in the community, like what's your sense of how strong we are right now, or how resilient we are right now?
Well, along with the community, nonprofits are suffering too. We're depending on getting the state GIA grants approved as well. And then with, everything on hold, nonprofits are definitely hurting, and Aaliyah Bridge is no exception. We're actually launching a fundraising campaign to see if we can get funds in to help us stay in the streets and help us keep doing what we're doing, because we're expecting just a massive influx of people entering homelessness or at risk of homelessness. Our phone rings off the hook of calls from people just asking if we can help with utilities, with back rent, can we provide them food. One of our food distribution events went from serving roughly 30 to 40 people to serving over 400. That's 1,000% increase in food distribution. And we expect it to only increase, as more and more people are unemployed. And with the stay-at-home work order being extended till the end of May, we can only imagine the amount of people that are going to start hurting. And so, it's definitely tough. We're going to do whatever we can to help the community during this trying time. And the only thing I really can say is the community really needs to pull together during this time and help each other and form partnerships and work together. Like, now's not the time for egos and pride and all of that other stuff. Like, we really need to set that down and work together with everybody, whomever it may be, to pull together as a community to help those that are in need. So that's what we're trying to do.
And I appreciate that. I think it's when things are really tense and intense, it adds a whole nother layer to collaboration. And I think oftentimes that's when misunderstandings get blown out of proportion, and it just makes any kind of latent conflict sometimes, just explosive. So I really appreciate that sensibility. What I wanted to follow up with what you just said is, I wondered if you're collecting data on the numbers of people who are calling and the kinds of assistance that they're asking for, because that kind of information helps policymakers, even prior to applying for GIAs or any of that other kind of work. If we have real concrete understandings of what's happening in the community, and you are really at the front line, then that helps us make more informed decisions. So I have that question, like, are you collecting data? And then the other question is, we have 150,000 people who have filed and claimed their unemployment insurance benefits, but who have not received any checks or any payments, right? So that's 150,000 people. And are you receiving phone calls from people who fall into that category, where they're just waiting on a check, and that's the thing that is keeping them, that is the thing that's taking them to the brink?
Yeah, first, to answer your first question, yes, absolutely. We're tracking everything. There's just so many different, avenues and aspects of services that we provide. I mean, food is one thing, so we're tracking how many food bags we serve and how many individuals we serve, how often we're doing food pantries. You and I are collaborating with some other organizations to do the one on the 8th. So that's one aspect. We have people calling because they need rental assistance, so we're definitely gathering data from that group. We have people asking for utilities, so we're gathering data from that group. And then we have people that, they're like, oh, we're on the streets and we're done. This whole COVID thing, we want to get off the streets. Can you help? So you have that bucket of people. So absolutely, we're trying to keep track as best as we can as far as where all the assistance requests are coming from and how we're able to handle it and deal with the situation. To answer your second question, absolutely. There's a lot of people that are just waiting on checks that haven't received it yet. And I know that there's been some major problems, and it was my understanding that the online system crashed because so many people had applied or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of it's a very disheartening and disappointing time for a lot of people, and they're stressed out and they're worried. So we do what we can to help out as much as we can. As we're a nonprofit. We don't have an endless bucket of funds to help everybody. So we just do what we can as much as we can when we can. But absolutely, there's a lot of people that are waiting on unemployment checks. Yeah.
And how do you decide, like, if you do have limited resources, and I absolutely get that, how do you decide how to use them in the way that helps the most people?
Well, a lot of programs that we have, because the funds that we do have are restricted funds, which means they are funds for a specific purpose. So each grant requires certain requirements. Like, you can't qualify for a rapid rehousing program unless you're chronically homeless or you've been unsheltered homeless. So that's one aspect. So we have to follow the guidelines of the grants, and that helps us determine, as well as using the coordinated entry system.
That makes sense. So I wanted to come back to this question about funding and thinking about moving forward, right? I mean, we're still in the grips of this problem. We have a month more of stay-at-home orders, and we also there are people who argue that even though we've kind of flattened the curve, that it's just we could see a second surge. So that we also have to be prepared to pull back even further. So I am wondering, we are supposed to be getting a great deal of money from the federal government. There's federal money that's been allocated both to the state and to the counties. And I know, Reverend Houselessness, that probably is not something that, you've seen much of, but I think that in the past, something that has happened with that kind of funding is that they have made space for faith-based community organizations to partner with rebuilding efforts or with recovery efforts. And I don't know if anybody knows about that aspect of it, but Eddie, if you could speak to what you know of what's happening with the federal monies, how we're looking at allocating those either at the state or the county level, and how that could support your efforts.
Yeah, so I think that we've all kind of heard the on the news about how, $2 trillion has been allocated for COVID response nationwide, and Hawaii is definitely going to get a pretty sizable chunk of that. I think it's around $8 billion when all is said and done. But I think that as far as like where that's going to go, how that's going to be flowed, and who's deciding, I'm not aware of anything, and this may be above my pay grade, but I'm not aware of any kind of solid kind of decisions about where that's coming, how that's going to come down. We did have a few weeks ago, we did have Senator Schatz's office on our Monday webinars to talk about the CARES Act and what it means for Hawaii. And we probably will have them back on again in a week or two if we can get them, just to kind of give us updates and stuff like that. But when you break it down by the numbers, we're talking about, things like, $1.25 billion for homelessness and tenant-based rental assistance and things like that. So there's a lot of dollars that are going to be coming down and flowing into the state. The questions that come up, like Nikki's talking about, is that the issues are going to be what those dollars can be used for, how they can be allocated, where they can be allocated, what conditions come with the utilization of those dollars. And those are all things that are going to have to be worked out on kind of several different levels, right? Like as they come into the state, then once they get allocated to different departments, then how those departments or state entities or other community entities might allocate those out. And there's going to be checks and balances all along the way. And so what we've been doing so far is just trying to utilize all of the resources that we have available to us now to keep the ball rolling and be able to kind of provide whatever supports and guidance and kind of supplements that we can to providers. And I think that that's kind of that's gonna, we're gonna see this kind of start to pan out over the course of the next at least 6 months, I think. So on the one hand, it's really hopeful. There are a lot of dollars that are gonna be coming into the state. And on the other hand, I think that folks, the reality of it is that it's not gonna be a blank check. And it's gonna be, there are gonna be things that we're gonna have to kind of organize and work out.
Is there any danger of us not being organized enough to fully access those dollars? What is the deadline for us to have a plan in place to be able to utilize those dollars?
I'm not positive if there's a specific deadline. So I think again, that might be a little bit above my pay grade. But I will say that, kudos to Senator Schatz, because I think, absolutely, he's definitely, he and his staff are definitely in the thick of it in Washington. And, I think there's been plenty of contact with between him and the governor's office and General Hara and others at that level who are working out, kind of where things should go and how things should be allocated. And I do very much believe that there's a lot of consideration for, how do we manage things like housing supports and rental assistance and stuff like that to make sure that we don't leave our community, kind of leave them hanging. So I know that there's, the few conversations that I've been privy to, I know that there's absolutely, that's first and foremost on folks' minds in terms of getting the resources to the people who really need it.
Yeah, so, I really hope so.
Yeah, and I'll just say that once it does come to my level, that's absolutely my goal, is to make sure that we reduce all of the administrivia that we can, so that the community doesn't have to deal with that. that the way that we implement it and kind of manage it will be as painless as we possibly can make it for the community organizations. And we would include faith-based organizations as well to the extent that we could. So really, as Nikki's talking about, this is not a time for ego. We got to put the principles before the personalities and make sure that we focus on taking care of each other.
Yeah, agreed. You mentioned Senator Schatz's work, and I have also been very impressed with the alacrity with which he communicated with lawmakers and just the community in general, and in particular about the payroll protection program. I think that Hawaii's very successful rate of application for the program has meant a lot. So it's given us a little bit, like the possibility for more buffer. And Nikki, I'm wondering if Alea Bridge, if you guys were able to use that program. I'm worried about your organization in particular because without GIA funding, then I wonder what you'll be using for bridge funding or to continue to do the work at the level that you're doing it. And I think your work is gonna, as you said, expand, so.
Yeah, so we are taking advantage of every program, grant that we can apply for. So absolutely we have. And like you mentioned, we're launching a fundraising campaign come Monday to also raise funds to stay, keep the organization afloat and keep the doors open. So yeah.
That's super time consuming to apply for all those grants, you know?
It is, yeah, it is. But a necessary evil, right? We got to do it if we want to keep the doors open. So like Eddie said, no blank checks anywhere, but unless anybody wants to send me one, we have to apply. So.
Right. Okay, I have a couple questions from the community. And any of you who feel like you can answer this question, feel free to jump in. The first question is, where can a homeless person get shelter if they don't want to stay on the streets and have no children?
Go ahead, Nikki.
I was going to say, I guess I'll take that one. There are a limited number of shelters that are still accepting individuals and doing intakes. There are some that have certain protocols as far as they will screen you and take your temperature, things like that. But what I do, if I'm not mistaken, understand is that a lot of the shelters are actually trying to minimize the amount of people in the shelter to allow for social distancing and to ensure that the clients that are in the shelter can have enough adequate space to do that. So they're actually trying to expedite getting people into permanent housing or transitional homes and things like that. So I personally would not encourage anybody to go to a shelter at this time. Like I said, we are strong supporters of the shelter in place guidance right now. So that's what we suggest. If somebody is adamant that they absolutely do not want to be where they're at, we will certainly go and research and see which shelters have availability. I know they have, as everybody knows, they have the new POST program that is run by HPD. So we would offer things like that. Or we would try to get them directly from streets into either a transitional home or a permanent shelter if we can. But by far, sheltering in place is the best option at the moment.
Okay. And then the second question, this might also be for you, is in Central Oahu, is there anywhere set up for folks who are currently houseless to recover should they get sick? Or are there any plans, to, if there's no site, which I'm not aware of any site, are there any plans to set up such a site?
As far as I know, I have not heard of any plans to set up any kind of quarantine site here. I think the closest thing that we would come would be the blue site for POST that, if I'm not mistaken, opened up 3 days ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eddie, but I think 3 days ago they opened up at Lehua Park. But that would kind of be the closest, but I believe they have to go to a red site for 50 days first before even being able to transfer it there. So as far as I know, there are no talks or anything like that. I think the directive to shelter in place would also be adequate in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you know, big shout out to the city and county who we're partnering with on a number of projects, the POST included, for really just kind of getting out there and really doing a lot of really great stuff. And the POST is one of them. And I think that I would echo Nikki as well in terms of if there is some place that if a person does need some place to go, that's where I would start. And on our if for lack of a better way of getting the information, if you want to go to the BHH Surge website, we do have the flyer for the post on there under one of the tabs, and that's where you can get the contact information. So
what I also appreciate about your website, the BHH Surge, was that you provided such explicit guidance for all of the providers. It was really detailed, and I think I know that the Senate Select Committee is asking all agencies to provide that kind of detailed direction and guidance to the organizations that they're working with. So, I mean, I think it's a model example of what should happen.
Well, I can't really take any credit for it other than just saying, hey, we need a website. And then a lot of my staff did some amazing work on it. So, and continue to do it. So thank you. Yeah.
So we are coming to the close of our time. Are there any questions that you guys wanted to discuss or issues that you thought we should broach? Any final comments? Things you want to say that you haven't had an opportunity to say?
I just want to ask Nikki again. It sounds like, you know, it would be great if we could all donate online and support your organization as we're able. Is there anything else that you all need right now from members of the community?
So we are taking donations. You're welcome to go visit our website. There's information on our website as far as, you know, how to donate, how to sign up for scheduling a donation drop for things like clothes, hygiene items, anything like that. We recently just got a phone call from a community member who wanted to donate face masks for the homeless community. And that's a big one because we've been passing out the face masks that we have to the homeless community, but they're kind of disposable ones, not cloth ones. So it's hard for them to, you know, keep them clean and keep using them. So things like that, face masks, any kind of PPE for the homeless community. We recently, from Partners in Care, got a big load of blankets and some slippers, things like that. We had another community member donate through another organization 250 pairs of socks. And that's like a really great item for the homeless community. Hygiene items, hand sanitizer, anything like that. We're always taking donations, absolutely. With much appreciation if anybody would like to donate.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I think everybody who's listening, I would definitely encourage folks to, if you have things that you can donate, even if it's things that you're not sure are needed or are you're just kind of on the fence about it, please donate those things, please, and donate them to providers of your choice, like Alea Bridge, for example. Go straight to them, donate it straight to them. And if you don't have a provider, if you're not sure like where to donate it, then you can also link up with, we have what we call resiliency hubs, where the department is taking donations and then using those hubs to, and we did it in partnership with the Hawaii Community Foundation, to use those hubs as places where people can just drop PPE or a homemade mask or supplies off, and then we then distribute it out to providers based on what they're telling us that they need. So there's two ways to do it. There's go directly to the provider that you know and are aware of, like Alea Bridge for sure. And then also if you're not sure, then go to the Resiliency Hub.
Awesome. Thank you. That was perfect. I forgot to talk about Resiliency Hub, so thank you. So are there any final comments that anyone wants to make? I'm so grateful for everyone joining us today. And so just so you know, there were technical issues. I managed to get it live on Facebook, but I think I made it so that only I could view it. So I'm gonna be sharing that video once we get off and I figure it out. So I apologize. This is not actually super live. It's gonna be pseudo live. But I'm so grateful for you guys coming on and sharing your insights and the work that you're doing. I'm really grateful for this community and community leaders like yourselves. And I count Eddie amongst us because you come to our neighborhood board meetings so often that everybody knows you.
Oh,
so, yeah. Any final comments? Anything that you think the community needs to know about this work?
I would just like to thank the community for being patient and being willing to, you know, kind of, I've seen so much. I think there are people that are stressed out, and when they're stressed out, they get, you know, kind of upset about things. But I think that's been kind of way less than what I've seen in terms of community folks being just patient and communicative and supportive and just willing to kind of suit up and show up and, you know, do something, you know, contribute something, whatever it is. So I think these are the times where we really kind of see how amazing our community really is and how connected we really are. So yeah, thank you.
I appreciate that. I think that's true.
Yeah, and I would just add to that and say, you know, everybody needs to remember that however much of a hard time, you know, you may be having, everybody's having a hard time right now. So you really just need to remember to, you know, stay calm and, like Eddie said, be patient and like just keep living aloha, help the next guy if you can, open the door for somebody, you know, smile at a stranger. I mean, just little acts of kindness really go a long way during these trying times. And when, you know, there's so much uncertainty, the one certain is being kind to somebody doesn't cost you anything, you know, but it does so much for the community. So just a reminder to always keep living aloha. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Reverend, did you want to add anything, or do you feel like?
I'm just really grateful for this opportunity to connect with folks and continue to learn about how we can serve our neighbors and be part of our community, Wahiawā. So thank you.
You guys make me want to cry. So thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I really appreciate it. Mahalo, mahalo, mahalo. And see you guys later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.